Hey Tom, thanks for coming on. How are you?
My pleasure. Thank you for having me again. It's a different series, but I'm honored to be
Yeah,
brought
nice.
back.
Yeah, nice to see you again. So as we were talking, this new series is about launching podcasts, especially for B2B. And I'm gonna have four experts, and all these topics will be a deep dive, not 101. And with you, I want to talk about how to differentiate a podcast as you launch hundreds of podcasts over the years. Maybe we can talk about a outline, about like start to finish, how to differentiate it, how to think about it. And I love your frameworks and how you think about things, especially in marketing. So I would love to hear your opinions about that.
Yeah, sounds good. Should I just jump in?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's, in my head, as you're saying that, there's probably two things to consider, or two frameworks. The first one is just ensuring that we're narrow enough. It's always easy. So when I say narrow, I mean the positioning of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even mentioning this, but we have to make sure we have very clear positioning. It has to be, as soon as the person who's your ideal listener, your listener persona, stumbles upon the show, they have to be like, oh, yes, this is for me. So
Mm-hmm.
we have to have strong positioning. But the first point I'm going to make is that we have to be narrow enough. Unless we're like Workday, and we could probably start a podcast like we work on this podcast. It's literally called the Workday podcast because they've got a load of cash. But if you're not Workday, then we need to choose a category that we can, in theory, become the number one most downloaded podcast in this category in 6 months. That's the goal. And so you then obviously have to look at your budget. And so let's say you have sales software, quite a common case at the moment. We're probably not going to start a show about sales. We might,
Yeah.
well, recently we started a show in sales compensation or just in outbound sales because we're pretty confident we can be the number one in 6 months. So
Mm-hmm.
actually the best example of this is the email marketing software. So they're launching a podcast. They have three options. It could either be about marketing, or it could be about email marketing, or it could be about open rates. So we would normally recommend to start narrow because it's always easier to start narrow, get that loyal audience, and then expand. So that's the first thing. The second thing is timing. The very first B2B podcast I started was in the world of sales operations. Now, sales operations didn't used to be a thing until like 3 to 5 years ago. Now everyone's talking about it. Well, it's actually revenue operations. It's evolved as well. But when we were first starting, sales operations was just becoming a thing. So sales operations, basically the ops people for sales teams. And so I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but I think we nailed the timing because 4 years ago, we started a show called Sales Ops Demystified. And it was very easy to grow that show to be one of the most downloaded in sales ops because we had the timing right. So that meant we focused on that position and there wasn't much competition because we were just early into the game. I was speaking to some people yesterday. I think maybe an opportunity right now, if you're in like the media space, it's retail media. It's like a very hot topic right now. It's like buying ads, EasyJet selling ads to tourism boards when there are people buying flights. And so my advice to them was like, yeah, start this right now because it's hot and in 2 years, there's going to be a lot more competition. So those are the two things, get the timing right and get the niche sufficiently narrow if we're looking to differentiate a B2B show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when you say like start a podcast and email open rates, one thing that I'm thinking about is you can be an expert in that area faster than others because I think there are less experts in email marketing open rates than in general email marketing, and with that you have less options to like invite people to the show as guests. Do you do that on your own, or do you like invite the general email marketing expert and then ask him about email marketing open rates?
Yeah, so if we're just trying to be the number one open rate podcast, then we're just going to build a list of the top 20 thought leaders in open rates and then bring them on the show. All we're going to talk about is open rates. Now, the thing we haven't mentioned is like the connection between the positioning of the show and the product. So if your email marketing software is just built to optimize open rates, then this is ideal. That might be a little bit too narrow even on the SaaS side though, on the software side or the agency side if you have an agency. But it still worked. Like if your competitive differentiation for your email marketing software is that you have open rate split testing or something, then this would still work. But again, the same strategy applies. Like find the top 10 most famous people in email marketing open rates, find the top 10 most like experts. They might not be the most famous. Find 10 people in email marketing open rates that could be a customer of yours. And then that's 30 people that you're going to go out and try and get on the show, and you're just going to talk about open rates.
Mm-hmm. And how do you differentiate your own podcast?
Man, yeah, it's a great question. So it was interesting.
Can I say what I think about it?
Yeah, please.
Differentiate. I think it is similar to Nathan Latka's podcast, where everyone talks about all their revenue numbers, like failures, all the things that they wouldn't talk anywhere else. And I think that's the same for your podcast as well. I share lots of stuff that I would not share anywhere else, and I don't know if it's a relationship that you have with the guests, or is it, I don't know, the way you ask the questions. But I think that lots of people share lots of things on your podcast.
I appreciate the feedback. And it's very interesting you bring that up, because I'm heavily influenced by that show. I've listened to so many episodes. And what happened is when I started the show, it was actually not focused on B2B, but it was focused on SaaS. And I was trying to be like that. I was trying to like ask for numbers, etc. But then I realized that my personality doesn't actually enable that, because I'm really bad at like pushing people to give answers on anything. Whereas Nathan is like, he's built for that. He's just a machine. He really doesn't care. So I realized that I can't be like that hard on numbers, but I do want people to open up, because obviously that's better content. And so I probably do it in a nicer way. I don't push anyone. So the positioning of the show did shift from SaaS to B2B, because that better aligned. I'm not sure why. I think that better aligned just with my interest, because, and with fame. So obviously the people that pay for the podcast can sell their thing to software or service, and therefore B2B is better aligned. Now, the niche of the show is B2B, but then the like special sauce, or how would I describe it? The flair, or the differentiation is confessions of. So basically me sharing stuff. I do some solo episodes, but then I do also try to get people to come on and just not talk about their careers, but just share real things that they've done or that they're doing. And I got the confessions of idea from a very popular podcast here in the UK called Diary of a CEO, where this guy called Stephen Bartlett just, not anymore. Now he just does big emotional interviews. But previously it was like him talking about and like sharing from his diary. So that's quite a clever concept, I thought. So I took that to create Confessions of a B2B Marketer, which is what the show is now.
Mm-hmm. And I was like thinking about, if I don't have any ideas to go niche, or if there are like other podcasts that have been niche, I think you can also do what you did, what Nathan did, but probably My First Million did as well. My First Million is a very general podcast, but there's some exceptions there. They're like sharing business ideas, and the conversation just flows, and they like interrupt each other. They do all sorts of things, and it's funny. Maybe there are other ways to differentiate as well, like the way you talk, the way you ask questions, maybe I don't know, other stuff.
For sure. So I think that My First Million, I don't think they needed to be like super niche, because they had the distribution through the Hustle at the start, and they do have two hosts that are very like, they already had a personal brand and a really good host. But you mentioned an interesting point. We've talked about category and positioning, making sure the niche is narrow. We talked about timing, but I think the third one, you're right, is differentiation. So once we have those two things, if we have nailed the timing and we have got the positioning like really narrow, we don't really need the differentiation that much. But if we're in like B2B marketing, the timing, like that ship sailed a while ago. It's not like a massive, like on the up and up now, and is relatively broad. And so then what is the other aspect you can tie into the show that makes it a little bit different, that your ideal listeners can tell their friends about? And so what you just get, the feedback you just gave me about my show is great, because that's something that how you describe the show in like quite a compelling way. And so I tried to think of examples of this on the fly, of how people have done this. What I really like about Nathan Latka's show is that his differentiation is he's essentially just collecting data that he then monetizes in other ways. So his differentiation is just like hard and go straight for the numbers, which I think is really, really good approach. There's another great example. I think it's by a company called Databox. The show's called Metrics and Chill, which is a great name. And their differentiation, so there is like numbers. I think it's probably B2B metrics would be the positioning. And their differentiation is they just focus on a single metric with each guest. So they get the guest to select a metric, they come on and break down what they're doing around this metric. And so I think that's a really awesome way of like differentiating in that category.
Yeah, that's a great example. I didn't know that. I listened to one episode, but I didn't know all the episodes were the same. And when you're working with B2B companies, right? Their marketing teams to launch their own podcasts. And why do they want to launch a podcast in the first place? Because many of the people that I talk with and our customers, they're thinking that if I launch a podcast, I would not know if it brings revenue or not. How do they think about it?
Yeah, it's probably 5 reasons. Probably the most popular is probably people just say brand awareness. So obviously not very good to attribute. This is good we're talking to you guys. When you guys have like a podcasting attribution solution, like we're going to make a shitload of money. So brand awareness, lead generation, content production, and actually it's going to be 4 learning. So I'll quickly run through them. So brand awareness, basically just getting more people to see the brand. So that's the obvious one, like growing the listenership. Lead generation can come from the guest side or from the listener side. Also can be used to generate partners. So both from the guest side and the listener side. So it's building relationships with the guests and also getting partners or customers from the audience. Short term, normally more likely to get from guests. Long term, normally more likely to get from the audience. Third one is obviously like the amount of content you can produce from one 30-minute like video recording. It's like crazy, like videos, images, written, obviously. And the fourth one, maybe actually one of the things that I enjoy in my podcast for the most is learning. Not many people come to us and say they want to start a show to learn, but I find I learn a massive amount from bringing on guests that I want to learn from and then recording with them. So those are probably the 4 reasons, but we can dig into any of those if you want.
Yeah, maybe we can dig into learning and how is it different from, listening to another podcast. For me, that is different because we can continue the conversation anywhere else, like on LinkedIn DMs, email, etc. Or I can bring them onto another series.
Yeah, you have a theory about relationships. If you think about the people that are like closest to you, for me, it's normally like my old school friends because we went traveling together or like we've gone on these adventures. We've been through the roller coaster of growing up. And so my theory is that your closest relationships are the people that you've had the most emotional variability with. So if you do something really sad or like really good, or ideally both, that's why traveling is a good example. You form bonds. Is how you form bonds. And so if you think about the process that you, the host and the guest go through when you record an episode on a podcast, there's excitement, there's stress, there's uncertainty, and there's a feeling of like contentment afterwards. And so obviously you can learn in the interview. And I like that. The reason that's different from another podcast is you get to A, choose the person, and then B, you get to choose the questions. But then you do have this bond that you can then use for even more learning or opportunities post recording and post release. And so that's why I think that there's significant learning opportunities.
And can we go through, for example, an attribution software comes to you and then says, I want to launch a podcast with you. I want to, learn, bring guests that are on our CRM, but we have not closed them yet. We want to have relationships within our industry. What's the process from start to finish to launch that podcast and beyond?
Yeah, so let's go through the three like strategy areas. So the positioning, the timing, and then the differentiation. So for me, right now, like attribution's hot, right? And so, but then also I need to understand the product. Like, does the focus stack, is it just B2B focus?
Yeah.
Yeah, so B2B attribution is hot. Have you done the research? Like, have you just searched B2B attribution in Apple Podcasts? I'll do it now.
No.
because I doubt there's going to be much there. And
But
so
if
I
there
would be
was a
tempted.
podcast that I would not probably.
So look, I would be tempted because it's hot, the timing's right, and it's sufficiently niche. It's like a sub niche within B2B marketing or B2B or just B2B revenue. I would be tempted to. Okay, so I just searched B2B attribution in Apple Podcasts. I've got the attribution marketing podcast. It's a horrendous name. And then I've just got B2B ones, revenue marketing. Yeah, right, so this is, I would just call it B2B attribution. That's the show.
Just B2B attribution.
Yeah, that's it. Because that's also, I mean, it probably doesn't have that high search volume, but or maybe it does. So you're just going to capture that. You could put some keywords after that, or you could put hockey stack, or you could put your name after that. But that would just be the show. And then all you're going to do is bring on whatever job role it is within the B2B revenue team that's responsible for attribution, typically someone in marketing. You know that better than me. And then we just want to get people to talk about how they're currently attributing. That's it. Now, sometimes when we try and do this kind of thing, we run into problems because there might be some competitive sensitivity to this. But I'm not too sure. Like, do you think, based on your knowledge of your ideal customers, because they're super nerdy about this stuff, they really like they go home after work, they can't share it with their spouse because their spouse doesn't care about B2B attribution, and I bet they love talking to you about it. So the question is, do you think we'd run into any issues with like them not wanting to share what tools they're using? Like, we're not going to ask them for their like number of sales call data. Do you know what I mean? So we just want to know how they're tracking.
Yeah, they would probably share how like which tools they're using, but from the company's perspective, I would not probably want to have another comparison name mentioned. Yeah, and if they say like I'm using Visible and I'm really happy with it, I would recommend that to everyone. I don't know what I feel about that.
Then you don't want to advertise other people's tools because they might be because they might be competing to you. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we're not going to focus on tools, or we can focus on tools but just cut out any competitors. But then there are probably other things around attribution that we can ask them. But I think the gold is, and you know this listener persona better than me, but I think the gold is that they're just going to learn how other people, how their peers are attributing stuff.
Yeah, like from my experience, no one knows which metrics to optimize for. For example, if they're running a LinkedIn ads campaign, if it's a reach campaign, they don't know what to optimize it for. Is it for CPC, CPM, impressions, reach, something else?
Yeah. So we're just going to find those people that do know, and we're going to share that with them. I think it's the thing. This could work for you guys.
I'm going to launch this.
Yeah, for sure. It's a no-brainer.
You know how it goes. And also, I think. Sorry, you can go.
No, you go. I was just trying to think what's next after we've done the positioning of strategy. So the positioning of B2B attribution, the differentiation is that we're going to have real people coming on and sharing what they are actually doing to attribute. But we're not going to go into too much detail on the tools. I think that is sufficient to get some growth.
I was thinking of like one part of attribution is like cost per acquisition, cost per MQ, all that stuff. And that's the biggest part to like optimize for, bringing the cost down. And I don't know if there's a like good data source like Nathan Latka's for cost per acquisition, for example, in B2B marketing space, or cost per acquisition for email marketing software. They would probably not share it, but maybe we can collect data and then analyze it and then create a database with that podcast.
Yeah, so obviously you'd have to collect the data like off air, not in the recording, right? And then anonymize it. Yeah, so I'm down for that for sure. You may have to anonymize it. Like, I don't think anyone else is going to pull off what Nathan Lack has done. I think maybe if he tried to do it these days, he might not be able to, but it's just the social proof now because everyone's done it. But yeah, so like as a sideline, an extra content play, extra like market research play, you could collect that data from these people as they go through your podcast process.
And I think how Nathan Lutke gets the data is he has founders, CEOs on the podcast, and they don't have like anyone else to ask. If I have head of marketing, they would need to ask their
Yeah, they
legal
get
team,
fired.
their founders. Yeah, and they get fired.
Yeah. That's a very good point. So what's next then? We have the differentiating factor and we have the positioning. Next up, let's just talk about guests for a bit. So there's three things you want from a guest, or three areas. A, they have to be an B2B attribution nerd. That's the must-have. The other two are maybes. The next one is, could they be a good customer or partner? And then the third one is, do they have an audience where your customer is, e.g., in this case, probably LinkedIn. So the second two are maybes, but the first one is a must. And you probably know, because you're quite active on LinkedIn, you probably know like 10 of these people already.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great outlay.
So we'd book them in, like initially. Now, obviously, you know these people, so the benefit of them, or they may have already bought, they may already be partners. That's fine. When you start off, you want people that you know, so you can like ease into it. But then you probably just run. I think you guys, or assume you guys might be running cold outreach anyway, or if not, you can just run cold outreach to find these people, to bring them into your network and to ideally make them become a customer or partner in the future. If they are number one, that's the most important thing. Like, never let go of number one. If you let go of number one, you lose listeners, and then that's a downward spiral for the show.
And do your like support companies that you're working with, how do they go about like having guests on the podcast to turning them into a customer? Do they like, I don't know, reach out to them later, or is it a natural process? Because for us, it's we don't push them, we don't do cold outbound. It's just a natural process. Like, oh, after a couple months, oh, I was a guest on your podcast, and now we have this problem. Can we solve this? Something like that.
Yeah. So it has evolved over the years. When I was doing this with the sales ops show, I was employed. I was head of marketing at a B2B SaaS company, and the CEO was like, "You need to say at the end of every interview, you basically need to suggest a time for a demo of the tool. So finish the recording, book in the demo." I probably got like 80% compliance on that to book, but then maybe 30% would drop off. And we did actually get customers from that, so I don't know why I'm flagging it off, but it was a bit awkward. And so that's like the hardest sell. And then the softest sell is to actually not ever say anything else about the product again. And that can still result in customers or partners. What we will typically do is just encourage or help our hosts continue to like build that relationship, like essentially liking, commenting on LinkedIn. If you see an article, send it to them, just to like keep you there. And then at some point in the future, go, hey, based on what I saw, based on what you said in the interview, or based on what I've seen recently, I think that we could potentially help you solve this problem. I can jump on a call with you, like no obligation, to talk through the problem, and hopefully I can advise you on that. And then that would be the next step. So that's like in the middle with probably what we'd advise.
And which one would you do?
So
if you had a B2B SaaS company?
Yeah, I would probably right now what I would do is I'd have probably not the host reach out. The host would do the interview. If there's something that's mentioned in the interview that we think we can help with, and if we have any other data, like we know what other tools they're using, etc., then post-interview, the host would then reach out to the guest and be like, can I intro you to someone else who thinks he can solve this problem, he or she can solve this problem. And then like if the guest then says yes, then make that intro. That's probably what I do right now. But that might be for like 40% of guests. If we don't have that, then I probably wouldn't do anything at the moment.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, Tom. Is there anything else that you want to add to this conversation?
Yeah, so we spoke about guests, we spoke about positioning. We didn't go into a promotion, but that's fine. That's not the point of this interview. What would I say? Yeah, I think just like it's the highest leverage thing to get right is the first three things: the timing, the differentiation, and the positioning. And whenever I see a B2B show, like most of them that I see don't get those three things right. And so that's probably the big takeaway for anyone considering it, is to get the three things right. Get the positioning narrow enough, jump on a topic that's timely if possible, or jump on the positioning that's timely if possible, and then try to have some kind of differentiation that will enable your ideal listener to tell their friends about your show.
If I have the right positioning, right timing, and if I'm in a niche topic, is there anything else that might make my podcast unsuccessful?
Yeah, getting the big name guests most recently has probably had the biggest impact for my show. So just hustle, getting big name guests, just climbing the ladder. So you just have to hustle to get the first one. And then as soon as you get the first one, you use that as social proof. And then ideally you get some big social proof names, and you just keep going to try and get bigger and bigger names. So that's probably the thing that I'm seeing the most luck with right now, because I finally cracked a couple of big names in B2B marketing. And so I'm just going to keep going, climbing up the ladder. So that's probably the next thing to focus on.
Who was the first big name guest on our podcast?
So the show, it actually started because I think you remember the SaaS marketing case studies, or SaaS hacker case studies. Yeah. So I would write 4,000 word breakdowns about how SaaS companies grow, publish them. And then obviously that was normally quite good for the marketing person or the founder of that SaaS company. And I'd reach out to them and be awesome. Hey, do you want to come on the podcast? So I think that came out of the Ahrefs one, and I got Tim Solu. That was probably the first one.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I watched that. When was that?
That was 2-3 years ago. And so the lesson there is, if you don't have any social proof, you have to do things that I guess are not scalable, or just do something for them beforehand to get their attention.
Yeah, I remember your podcast with Tim. I think he was talking about how they do not measure anything on the website. They don't gate anything. They don't even measure conversion rates. They don't do any paid ads.
No Google Analytics. That was no Google Analytics. The hook from the episode, I think.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tom. It was awesome to chat with you. And
my
thank
pleasure.
You so much for sharing everything.
I look forward to subscribing to what do we agree on? B2B attribution. Yeah, I'm going to subscribe.
Yeah.